Okay, America, we have a lot happening here. So much. Face masks, yes. The world is changing. We're all wearing them. Designer, paper, every kind, N95. We know more about face masks now than we ever wanted to know, than we ever will want to know. But we're wearing them with the hope of mitigating the spread of coronavirus. But there's a lot going on today. I've got a pile of stories here from SarahCarter.com, which Jenny so gratefully printed out for me. We have a very special guest. We have Congressman Andy Biggs. You know, he's been a big opponent of what's been happening in the bureaucracy as far as like with rules and regulations regarding coronavirus, regarding the spread of COVID-19. And he's going to be here to talk a little bit about that. He's also going to be here to talk about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, the squad, the Biden campaign, and how, you know, they really want to fundamentally change our nation, take our nation and fundamentally change it. Unlike anything we've ever seen. This is not the same progressive party. This is not the same Democratic Party that we saw in the time of John Lewis or when people marched. And by the way, Congressman Lewis, God rest his soul, is being taken through Washington, D.C. today. The streets are lined up. He is a historic figure, an icon. I would run into him off and on all the time on Capitol Hill. Always a kind man, always a wonderful gentleman. Even though we disagreed politically, his actions with Dr. Martin Luther King on nonviolence were extraordinary. They changed our nation fundamentally. They stood up to tyranny and they didn't lift their hands in violence. They showed young children, they showed the world that you can change a system without being violent. And thank God we come from a country with a constitution that grants the ability that all men are created equal. All people are created equal, right? So they based everything on the fundamental law of our Constitution, the principles of this country, and they stood up against tyranny, and they marched. And they marched in Alabama. And they marched in Washington, and they marched all over this country, and they did it. I'm going to tell you an interesting story. When my first year of college in California, I was actually with Amnesty International. I actually founded an Amnesty International chapter that stunned Jenny Taylor, who works with me. She's like, oh my gosh, you're so different. No, I believe in that. I still believe, fundamentally, maybe not the organization, but in human rights and human dignity. And that people should not be imprisoned for their political points of view. But I did meet a really incredible man that came to speak on my college campus. I would go to his church to sit through his sermons, and he was Reverend James Lawson. And Reverend James Lawson actually marched with Martin Luther King. And I feel so blessed that I knew him. I was so inspired by his words. He actually traveled to India to learn nonviolence. So now, why do I bring this up? You're saying, why, Sarah, why are you talking about this nonviolence? Why? We don't want to hear that. We want to talk about other things like, Ilhan Omar's craziness or Rashida Tlaib and all of her ideas and, how she wants to fundamentally change the country. Because look at what's happening today. Look at what is happening in Portland. Look at what is happening in Seattle. Look at what's happening in Chicago, in New York, in Washington, D.C. If anything, these young kids that are out there, Antifa, some of them are just thugs that need to be arrested, that are violent. We saw weapons in Portland. The police sequestered weapons, actual weapons in Portland, knives, guns. These are not pacifists. These are not progressives trying to make the world a better place. These are violent Marxist socialists. This is what is happening to our country. If you really wanted to make a change, you would not lift up your arms. You would not destroy your communities, your businesses. You're taking away people's livelihoods. Some businesses that people have spent decades building. What are they going to do? Where are people in the communities going to go when there's no more, shops, when the diners shut down, when they can't walk to the local food market, when it's all gone? What are people going to do? America, we need to wake up. We can no longer be the silent majority. Those of us those of us who know where this is headed cannot be afraid of being condemned. We got to stand up. There was a very, very important story that happened this weekend. Actually, DHS Secretary Chad Wolf and his house was surrounded by protesters. Why? Because he stands up. He stands up for law enforcement. He stands up for federal law enforcement. Not like Nancy Pelosi says. These are not stormtroopers. These are federal law enforcement officers protecting federal buildings. They are protecting the communities. They are not out there to harm anyone. We have to really be careful where this is heading because we've got basically 100 days left until the election. And I'm terrified of what can happen if we don't put a stop to this before that. I want to play a clip here. And this is really important. I want to play first a clip of Chairman Nadler, Jerry Nadler. We're going to talk about Gerald Nadler. And we're going to talk about his lies, his falsities in a minute. But I want you to hear what he has to say about Antifa. Listen to this.
It is true. There's violence across the whole country. Do you disavow the violence from Antifa? That's happening in Portland right now? There's riots.
That's a myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
About Antifa in Portland?
Yes.
Sir, there's videos everywhere online. There's fires and riots. They're throwing fireworks at federal officers. DHS is there. Look online. It gets crazy, Mr. Nadler.
It's crazy. It's crazy that Chairman Nadler, the Democrat, was basically saying that what's happening in Portland, what we are seeing with our own eyes on the streets of Portland with Antifa, which Andy Ngo, the journalist, has been reporting on for years and has now exacerbated into a culmination of over 50 days of violence on the streets, with people going to the hospitals, with buildings being burnt down, with the city in shambles, that Nadler seriously has the gall to tell you, the American people, that nothing is happening in Portland and that it's all a bunch of lies that are being made up here in Washington, D.C. by Republicans. I was like, what? What is wrong with this man? David Schoen, who I think is a brilliant, probably one of the top defense attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, and civil rights attorney in the United States, wrote an incredible op-ed at sarahcarter.com, and it's called Nadler Supported Pardons of Domestic Terrorists, but now he's seeking to rewrite the Constitution. People, what is happening now is something that we have never seen in our political history, in modern political history. First, they try to overthrow the president of these United States, which, by the way, was elected by you, the American people, a duly elected president. They use this concocted story, a Russia hoax story, trying to call our president of the United States. And remember, Nadler was a part of spreading all of those lies. Nadler and Schiff and the rest of the gang, they all lied to you. They all knew it was lies. They knew it was lies. So they lied to themselves. They lied to Congress. How funny is that, huh? They lied to Congress. They like to put people in jail, right? They like to go after friends of Trump that they say lied to Congress. But they lied to you, the American people, and they're fine. No, they're okay. They all lied about that. They had worked with a foreign intelligence agent, a British former MI6 agent, Christopher Steele, who, by the way, was paying Russians with money from the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign. They're paying them money to concoct up a disinformation campaign full of lies against the president of the United States. And now Nadler is saying literally to you, the guy that lies, the guy that now wants to rewrite the Constitution and take away the president's pardon powers. I want to take them away because why? Because the president pardoned Roger Stone, who's going to be on our show as well, by the way, to talk about this and to talk about what Hillary Clinton said about him. But we'll bring that up in a little bit. But wants to change presidential powers because he feels that President Trump shouldn't have been able to pardon Roger Stone, who is an old man who, by the way, these guys, along with the FBI, sent an armada of FBI agents to his home to take him into custody instead of letting him walk himself in to go into custody because he lied. That's what they said. They said he lied to Congress. So this is what happens, America. You will go to jail with an armada of FBI agents, and Jerry Nadler will continue to lie to you with Adam Schiff and the rest of the gang, and nothing will happen to them. They'll be just fine. They'll be just fine. They won't be held accountable. But we have to hold ourselves accountable. We can't be quiet while the liars talk. We need to speak up. We need to tell the truth, and we need to support one another. It's going to be tough. There are people out there that will not stand by your side. Guess what? That's life. That's life. There has to be something you're willing to fight for. If anything, be willing to fight for your country. We are going to be bringing on a man who fights every single day for this nation. It's Congressman Andy Biggs. I have the utmost respect for this congressman out of Arizona. He is up against a lot, and he's willing to face it without holding back. I mean, he takes that punch, and he punches 1-2, and he comes right back. He doesn't fear. I look forward to having him on, and let's hear what he has to say about coronavirus, because there's quite a bit there that the press is not telling you. I'd like to bring on Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona. He is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. Congressman, again, so happy to have you back on the Sarah Carter Show. I want to just start off right at the top with Ilhan Omar. You wrote this incredible op-ed at sarahcarter.com, and it's called Omar Wants to Destroy the Very Government That Gave Her Safety and Success. And the reason I want to ask about this is because what we're seeing in America right now, the destruction of our urban cities, is actually something I never thought we'd see at this point in time. I mean, if you would have said this 6 months ago, I would have said, you're crazy. This will not happen in the United States of America. But unfortunately, the culmination of everything that's happened between the death of George Floyd and COVID has led to this point.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Those of us who are old enough to remember some of the riots in the 60s, and particularly the Chicago riot in conjunction with the Democratic National Convention, you just wouldn't have seen this coming because we had incredible prosperity. Then the COVID comes, and basically we have lockdowns, and the lockdowns kill our economy. But the thing about Ilhan Omar that's really, really bothersome to me, I'll just give you 2 or 3 quick points. Number one, she came here. Her father worked in a previous administration in Somalia, and they had been that regime was ousted, and they came as refugees to this country. Mm-hmm. And she ascends to the highest legislative body in the world. And this country, because of its greatness, its generosity, the society that we have, the government that foments and buttresses that society, because of that, we welcome refugees. And then she comes and she wants to tear down all of the systems, everything about this government, everything about our society, everything about our freedoms. And that's where she is. And she's advocating that from her lofty political position. And at the same time, I just have to juxtapose this for you, Sarah. Mm-hmm. Everything else that's going bad and crazy in the world today, in the United States that we're dealing with, and you're dealing with somebody like that, and somebody like Tlaib, who's been vicious to this president and this country, and Presley and the squad, and they're concerned about something that is not uncommon in a legislative body where passions are high, and where they assert that Congressman Yoho swore at Ocasio-Cortez.
Right.
That's what they care about. They don't care about a speech that's advocating overthrow of the country, which is a direct violation of one's oath of office. They care about whether he used profanity toward Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Well, you brought up such a great point, because you're absolutely right. But it's something that they espouse. I mean, this idea of fundamentally changing the country. I'm going to play a quick clip here, and this is Ilhan Omar, and she calls for dismantling the United States economy and the political system.
As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
Dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it. This is so fascinating coming from Ilhan Omar, as you pointed out, who came to this country. This country opened up its arms like it does for refugees all over the world. We are the most gracious, most giving nation on earth. That is a fact. That is based on economics. It's based on statistics. We bring people into this country. We have 20 million possibly illegal immigrants living here that are still living here, that are being supported by this country. On top of it, the legal immigrants. And now we hear this from her. As you know, I think about this as John Lewis is your colleague. He passed away. He's a Democrat. Of course, we all don't agree on the same political issues, but he is an icon, a historical icon of the United States, part of a peaceful, pacifist, nonviolent movement with Martin Luther King for civil rights. And I hear this come out of Ilhan Omar's mouth that she wants to just dismantle our nation, take it apart. And there is no other nation on earth like this. What do we do when people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Ocasio-Cortez are basically engineering this whole new form of government right before our eyes? And we've got a candidate for the presidency, Joe Biden, who's basically, as everyone has been saying, is going to be their puppet.
No, he will be their puppet. You know where this is all born? This is all born from critical race theory, which is a Marxian dogma. It's an offshoot of Marxism. And what it says is that Marx just missed it when he talked about economic class warfare, that the reality is in society, it is racial warfare, racial class warfare. And that's an offshoot of the Frankfurt School, which again was people coming over here seeking refuge from Hitler and Nazism, coming over to the United States, and they brought this kind of dogma, which morphed into critical race theory. And so you've got Ilhan Omar and Presley and Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib, and there are many, many others that the whole Black Lives Matter official organizational movement, it's all based on critical race theory. And that theory says that it doesn't matter what you feel in your heart, who you are as a person, or anything else. Everything is based on racial inequality. And so when you hear Ilhan Omar says we're going to have to tear down the system because we have to get this inequality and we care about who's making a profit. The beautiful part of what has always been America is we didn't care about who was making a profit. We didn't care about your speech. We let you have opinions and ideas and make choices. But when you start saying we're going to care about who is going to make a profit, we're going to care about who is receiving benefits from society and from our economy, when reality, the egalitarianism that is inherent in a free market system is going to be tossed out, and authoritarianism is going to replace it. That's what she's talking about.
How dangerous is this, Congressman? How dangerous is the situation right now? Because I am talking to people consistently in your state of Arizona. I've got friends there. I've got family there. I have friends all across the country that are so concerned about what's happening in our major cities. They're saying like, hey, well, look, in my small town, I'm not seeing this here, but I'm really scared it's going to show up in my city. I'm really worried it's going to show up in my town. This divisiveness, this anger. What do you think the result of this can be? I mean, do you see this getting worse? Or do you see the Trump administration being able to do something to kind of stop or quell the spread of this violence?
Well, Sarah, this is the perfect opportunity for those who want to foment violence and basically an overthrow of our system of government. And that is, you have the economic distress of the lockdowns as a result of the COVID. You have when that started happening, it created this social unrest. So you had you and I would never have thought that one individual who was killed by a police officer, who was immediately arrested and all the other officers were immediately arrested and charged with very serious crimes. That's unlike most places in the world.
Right.
You never would have thought that the response to that would be riots and to tear down this country. That's why this is so dangerous. We've reached this apex of that movement where they've taken something that was being handled through the system itself that they want to condemn, where people were arrested, being investigated, charged with crimes, and they will be punished if they're found guilty of those crimes. That is a system that works. They don't like that system.
Well, let's talk about
it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They do want to replace it. That's really frightening. And you did talk about something that I think we need to delve just a little bit deeper into because it's such an important point, and it's the issue of the coronavirus and the I guess the effort by our government and what we have done to try to mitigate the spread of it. But there's so much confusion, Congressman. There are so many people out there that are saying, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what mask to wear. I don't know what to believe. I'm worried that if I question anything, if somebody gets sick, that I'm going to be blamed for it. I'm worried about my grandparents. I'm worried about my children. I know right now, even for my school, my youngest goes to a private Catholic school. There's a big debate right now whether or not they're going to be wearing masks all day in class or not, because some parents want masks all day. The majority of parents, we had a little questionnaire that went out. So it's about, I think 54% at our school right now don't want their children wearing masks all day. So that may take precedence. But a lot of the schools are shutting down here in Virginia, public schools, or rotating classes. We saw it in North Carolina. People feel utterly confused about this, worried about this. They don't know what to do. And I know you're one of the few people that has been willing to stand up and hold people accountable, like Dr. Fauci, like Dr. Birx.
Yeah, well, let's just face the facts. I mean, Drs. Fauci and Birx, I think, have engendered panic to a level in this country that I could not have imagined it we'd ever get. And with that panic and hysteria, people respond to that. People respond to incentives and concerns, and they're responding to these concerns. And so I look at the mask issue, and I feel like I've lost the mask issue. Although this very morning I was looking at another lit review that came out just about 6-7 weeks ago, and it basically said there is no empirical evidence that shows that mask prevents the spread of clinically diagnosed influenza. In other words, there's no evidence that it's going to protect it. But because of what Fauci went through, and Fauci's gone all over the board, by the way, he's just been all over the board. People feel like if you're not wearing a mask, you're going to kill somebody. I've actually had somebody tell me that before. So you get this kind of hysteria out there because people are confused, just as you say, Sarah. When you say people are confused, they are confused. I look at the data in Arizona, and I'll just give you one little tidbit. They have now changed the way that they're counting beds, hospital beds, and hospital bed availability. Before they always, and this was a mistake on their part, they counted hospital beds that they had to set aside for the surge. So they had 650 for ICU and 2,000 beds for just general beds. They always counted those full. They counted them full. Even though those were surge beds, they weren't even online. They were meant to come online immediately if necessary. But instead of now, so they took those out of the picture. But instead of saying, well, we have these 2,600 beds available if we need them, plus the vacancy that are already there, which would give you a very accurate picture, which would actually decrease the number of COVID patients in hospitals to something like 24% in Arizona. They leave it there, which bumps. They leave that out, so they're not using that to divide into as the denominator. So you get a distorted picture, and so it adds to this hysteria. It adds to the confusion, and when people are confused and when they're concerned and have fears that actually seem rational, then you're going to have the lockdown's going to perpetuate. And as long as that lockdown perpetuates, the economy is going to be bad, and it's going to give opportunities for the left and for anarchists to try to exploit those opportunities
right.
against the country. And that's a problem, a huge failing of the bureaucracy in America today. And I lay that on Fauci and Birx. In fact, Dr. Birx said 2.5 months ago, she said, well, we're overcounting fatalities by at least 25%. Think of that, at least 25%. That's what she told us 2.5 months ago. And why were we doing it? It was her policy. It was her policy where she said, but you
don't even have a mainstream media that is holding anybody accountable. Anybody who questions them is immediately ostracized. Anybody who questions them, if we say, well, that doesn't sound right, those numbers sound off, I'm not too sure about that, immediately you're ostracized. You want to kill someone. You don't care about human life. And it's so frightening to think that. I know I only have a little bit of time left with you. I want to ask you one more quick question. And I want to get your take on this because I think it's important. It's a question that everybody asks me. What's the worst case scenario with what we're seeing right now happening in our country? And what do you hope happens so that worst case scenario doesn't come to fruition?
Okay, so the worst case scenario, and it begins politically because policy begins with politics. And the politics here is if for some reason the Democrats were to be able to get unified government. I cannot tell you how bad that would be. First of all, you'd see implementation of just look at the first 5 or 10 bills that the House Democrats introduced. Those would become actual laws. They'd be the law of the land. Our economy would go belly up. And our supply chains that you already are seeing stressed would be continue to be stressed and maybe have more interruptions. And that means food supply, et cetera. You would continue to see this vilification of people who have contrarian points of view. And it would be vilification with legal attacks. So we saw that under Obama with the IRS pursuing conservatives. That would be expanded. We also saw it under Obama on political opponents, and that would be expanded. You would begin to see authoritarianism take hold in a way that's only reminiscent of something that from Orwell, Huxley, or the former Soviet Union, or even in China. That's really how serious this election is. Now, on the other hand, what I think is happening is I think Americans are starting to wake up and they're looking at the social unrest that's out there, and they're really ticked off. I think they're looking at the economy and saying Trump had a great economy going until we did this lockdown, and they trust him for the economy, and that's always so very important. So those things I think countermand and counterbalance some of the stuff that's going on the left. The stuff on the left is so radical. I mean, the Green New Deal. I mean, when AOC first introduced that, if you remember, her own chief of staff said, this has nothing to do with the environment. This has everything to do with control and remaking government. That's what that's about. So you have to realize that the counterbalance is maintaining the Senate and Trump, and maybe squeaking in with a slight majority of Republicans in the House. Although that's a tough slog to get there.
So that would definitely be something that we should all be wishing and hoping for, is that we have some kind of balance in our government where we don't see it skewed all to one side with the Democrats in control. Because I believe, like you, Congressman, if that happens, we will see a change in our country fundamentally that I don't believe we will ever come back from. Thank you so much for being on the show with us. I know you're busy. I know you got to run off, and I'm so grateful that you took so much time to be here with us today. Incredible show today. Not only do we have Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs, but right now on the line, we've got Roger Stone, and he is free. Roger is, it's been an incredible trying time for him, and now finally free, commuted by President Donald Trump. But the rumor mill and the lies never stop. And Hillary Clinton came out of her bunker. I don't know where her bunker is, or even if it's close to Joe Biden's bunker. She came out of her bunker to make a statement. Roger, I want you to hear this, and then I want to get your take on it.
So what he did was to use the awesome power of commutation as part of the pardon power of the president to basically shut up Roger Stone, so that Roger Stone would not spill any more beans about what actually happened and how much Donald Trump actually knew.
So what do you think, Roger? What do you think's going on here?
Well, this is typical Hillary Clinton. First of all, there are no beans to spill. I never said that I had any indication of misconduct or inappropriate actions by the president. The idea that I traded my silence in return for commutation or clemency is entirely false. What I have said is that Mueller's dirty cops put extraordinary pressure on me to cooperate with their investigation. In other words, to bear false witness against the president, to testify as to lies regarding our communications in 2016. And I refused. But you see, the mainstream media and people like Robert Mueller and Andrew Weissman and Rod Rosenstein and now Hillary Clinton, they attempt to twist that in some way. Let me be absolutely clear so that there is no confusion whatsoever. I'm aware of no misconduct by the president, and the idea that I somehow traded that knowledge, silence about that, for clemency is entirely baseless. It is false. Robert Mueller spent $30 million, had 3 years. He could find no evidence of that because it is not true.
I was just going to say that. How long before they just let go of the lie, right? I mean, they've had Robert Mueller investigating it, the Inspector General investigations, the congressional investigations, journalists who've been investigating. Not one iota of evidence that Trump or his campaign or any of his friends or you or anyone else was cooperating or had a conspiracy with the Russian government. No one. Yet they don't stop.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it from reading Robert Mueller's op-ed in the Washington Post the day after the president commuted my sentence. Let's be clear. The president acted out of a humanitarian spirit in an action of both mercy and justice. Despite all legal precedents in the last 30 days in every circuit, including the District of Columbia, taking into consideration the current rules of the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Federal Prisons, that nonviolent inmates or those about to go to prison be transferred to the safety of home confinement to protect them from infection by COVID-19. Despite my age and my health, and despite the rapidly deteriorating situations at the very prison they wanted to send me to, where we now have almost 200 confirmed cases of COVID-19, both Judge Amy Berman Jackson and then the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that despite the precedents, the regulations, the reality, and the facts, that I be sent immediately to a prison where only in the last 30 days they have released a child pornographer, a serial rapist, a pedophile, and an armed robber because of concerns over COVID-19.
I want all of you out there to understand this, what Roger is saying. This is absolutely true. They have released these people because of COVID, but they were going to put Roger Stone into prison with that outbreak of COVID. And I want to go to something really quick, Roger, because, David Schoen wrote a great op-ed today at sarahacarter.com. Everyone, please go there and read it. It's called Nadler. This is Chairman Gerald Nadler, supported pardons of domestic terrorists, but now he's seeking to rewrite the Constitution because now Nadler basically wants to pull back the president's authority to grant commutations and pardons. I mean, he's not going to be successful at this, but that's what he wants to do. And the reason he wants to do it is all based on you.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think they're really serious about this. It's just a platform to recycle the same lie over and over again. So again, Nadler says it's like the mafia. Stone bragged about the fact that he was blackmailing Trump. No, I didn't. What I said was that I refused to lie about the president under pressure from Mueller's dirtiest of dirty cops. That's not even closely the same, but it doesn't matter because the mainstream media, the corporate-owned media, continues to promulgate the lie. They don't want to examine the facts. I was in a life or death situation. The president had enormous courage in an election year to act to save my life. You see, had I gone to prison, my appeal would never have gotten to court. An appeal takes at least a year, probably cost me $1 million, but I want to continue to fight to clear my name. I would have no prospect of doing that were I to die in the interim, which was, given my age and my health condition, a very real possibility.
Well, you called it a death sentence. You called it a death sentence.
I think it was because they don't want my appeal to get to court because it will expose the epic corruption of the Mueller investigation and my entire trial.
Let me ask you something, Roger, because this is important. I've spoken to David Schoen. I've spoken to other attorneys. I've spoken to people who've been in this town for a long time. We know that so many senior level government officials have lied to Congress on the stand. Let's start with James Clapper, Director of National Intelligence. John Brennan lied. Gerald Nadler himself has lied, and Adam Schiff has lied as well. They said they had absolute proof that the president was conspiring with Russia. They spread these lies and propagated these lies and basically destroyed or attempted to destroy the lives of not only the president and his family and all of his friends around him, but they spread those lies around the world, which is actually, in my opinion, a national security threat to the country. When you're actually spreading these kind of lies, defamation against a president of these United States. Yet nobody seems to pay the price but the people right next to the president or his close friends. And the only one that can hold anybody accountable, that includes those people at the FBI that conducted this completely erroneous, fake, horrific investigation into the president based on complete and utter lies. The only people that can hold him accountable are the Department of Justice. What is going on here? Because without any justice, right? I mean, real justice, nothing is going to change. In fact, this country is going to get worse, and it could happen again to another president if no one's held accountable.
Well, you have to wonder. I mean, the very week that I was wrongly convicted, the new prosecutor in my case, J.P. Cooney, announced that the Justice Department would not prosecute Andrew McCabe, who admitted lying to the FBI. Two different Inspector General's reports recommended to the Attorney General that James Comey, the former FBI director, be prosecuted for crimes far more serious than those that I was accused and tried for. Yet the Department of Justice declined to prosecute. So do we have a two-tier justice system? Mr. Barr said that my prosecution was righteous. But why is the prosecution of James Comey not righteous? Perhaps the president appointed the wrong Barr Attorney General. Perhaps he should have appointed Bob Barr instead of Bill Barr, and then perhaps we'd have justice.
That's a big statement. And that's something that, I'm hearing quite often from people that had a lot of faith in Attorney General William Barr. So it's very interesting that's coming from you. People are very concerned. Because one of the biggest issues, and before I let you go, I'll ask you to comment on this, is the fact that Attorney General William Barr made a statement that this may not be resolved, this being the Russia hoax investigation by John Durham. He appointed the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut, John Durham, to investigate this case, that it may not actually come to any resolution or resolve until after the November elections, presidential elections. And I think that took everyone aback. And it also made it a little bit shocking because what if, anything can happen? We cannot say we know for certain what will happen. But if for any reason Biden, God help us all, wins, which I don't believe, but if that were to happen, what would happen to this case then?
It's an excellent point. And of course, it's just another strong argument why it is essential to reelect the president. Look, Sarah, at this point, I am just thankful to God, who I prayed to fervently for this result. I'm thankful to the president in an incredibly courageous act to step in and save my life against all critics, internal and external. But you raise a very legitimate concern. Mr. Durham has an excellent reputation. However, given these declassified documents, I don't think this is rocket science. We now know exactly what happened. Despite what the folks at CNN say, it is not in dispute. It is absolutely clear. And we're talking about an abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government was used and the extraordinary surveillance capability of our intelligence agencies were used for a strictly political purpose, to spy on the Republican candidate for president, to defraud the FISA courts, to use fabricated evidence to mount not one, but two different illegal coups to topple the rightful winner of the 2016 election. This makes Watergate look like small potatoes. And the question we have to ask is anyone going to be prosecuted other than that great American patriot, General Flynn, and myself? both of whom it is very clear now were prosecuted for strictly political reasons. We now know that they didn't even open the investigation into me until October of 2017, 3 months after Robert Mueller knew there was no Russian collusion. So the president's right. It's a witch hunt, but will anybody be held responsible? First, they said we'd have the results of Mr. Durham's investigation by the spring, and then the summer. Now we're being told not until after the election. Is that so it can be swept under the carpet if there's a change of administration? One has to wonder. It's just another extraordinarily important reason why the president must be reelected.
Well, you brought up a very good point. And Roger, you should know, I mean, you've been around this town for quite some time, and you understand the game of politics and politicking and what happens here in Washington, D.C. Where do you go from here now? What are the next steps for Roger Stone? What's your future hold?
Well, obviously, I have to pursue an appeal of my conviction because I would like to clear my name. My lawyers have to guide me on that path. It is my understanding that were the appeals court to overturn and invalidate my conviction, I would stand trial in front of the same trial court judge, again, Judge Amy Berman Jackson. I have to think about the viability of that. I'm going to write a book about this entire experience. I've written 5 previous books. I'm about 70% done with this one. The problem is the ending kept changing, so I had to keep updating it. I have to make a living, this having destroyed me financially, so I'm exploring certain offers to comment and write about politics, which is what I love. And then on a strictly voluntary basis, totally on my own, I will do whatever I can to ensure that the president is reelected. I'm not looking for a job, nor am I looking for any authority. But as an American citizen, I still have First Amendment rights. At least I got them back recently. And I will be advocating for the election of the president. To me, there are really 2 central issues in this campaign. Because the president had no choice but to act to protect the public health. And because he had to err on the side of caution, he's not a scientist, he had to take the projections of the scientists seriously. And thank God they turned out to be wrong. We have far fewer deaths than we had anticipated. That's a good thing. But the net result, of course, was the destruction of the most vibrant, robust economy we've ever had.
Right.
Now the question on the table is, who best to rebuild America's economy? A man who has just proven that he knows exactly how to do it, who got us record job growth, record wage growth, and record levels of employment, or a candidate whose prescription for the sick patient will kill the patient. Higher taxes, more regulation, and big omnibus one-size-fits-all trade deals. To me, the choice is very clear. Donald Trump is now a proven leader. You cannot disparage his ability to bring back our economy. He's already demonstrated that he knows exactly how to do it. In fact, his policies of cutting taxes and regulation are already working despite COVID-19. Look at the last 2 jobs reports.
That's right. No, you've always said this, Roger. You've always said this. You've always stuck by President Trump through thick and thin. You wanted him to run for president years ago. You've never swayed that. You've never swayed on President Trump. And, and for you now actually being able to say, whoa, I'm free, I'm not going to prison, has got to be such a relief. But I understand the need to want to clear your name. It's the same battle and fight that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn is going through right now. And you're right. I look forward, like you do, Roger, to ensuring and seeing that people are indicted, those that targeted the president, those that went after him and his campaign, people that we relied on, that we had faith in the Justice Department and in the FBI, that basically turned our nation upside down for the last 4 years. Everyone out there, all of you out there, know that this needs resolution. If it doesn't have resolution, God help us all, our country will be fundamentally changed forever. Thank you so much, Roger, for being with us today. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you come back really soon.
Thank you so much for making this forum available through this entire ordeal. You have been one of the journalists who had the courage to cover what was going on in my life accurately, and I'm deeply grateful to you as well. So thank you, and thank you to your many listeners who supported my legal defense fund, who prayed for me and my family. Thank you, and God bless you.
Oh, God bless you too, Roger, anytime, and I look forward to having you back on the show. I don't know about you, but every time I hear Roger Stone speak about what happened to him, and I think about that it could happen to anybody. I mean, it just so happened that Roger Stone is actually President Trump's friend. But I want you to think about what happens to the regular man, the regular Joe, the regular gal, right? Me and you. If the FBI is going after you, what recourse do you have? Especially if you know you're innocent. Especially if you don't have the money to fight back or the name to fight back. How many people backed Roger Stone? How many people fought for him alongside him? And he was able to get his story out. So it makes me wonder how many times this has happened in the past where we didn't know, right? And this is why I've always said from the beginning, when I started the investigation into the Russia hoax, that this was not their first rodeo. This was not the first time that former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, operated with this type of malfeasance. This is not the first time that former Director James Comey operated with malfeasance. And I want to say that it's not just based on hypotheticals. Remember, Rosemary Collyer was very concerned. She was the head of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. And she stated how concerned she was and the court was that they had lied on previous FISA applications. Those are those Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant applications that the FBI has to fill out so that they can spy on you. Those have to be 100% vetted, 100% certified. Everything in there has to be absolute fact. And the courts trusted the FBI. And now we know, based on actual evidence, that the Inspector General, that's Inspector General Michael Horowitz, during his investigation, found out that a number of FISA applications coming from the FBI had failed to include exculpatory evidence, had included erroneous evidence, and this is against other people. So we really have to think about this, folks. This, regardless of if you like or don't like Roger Stone, if you like or don't like President Trump, this is not about them. This is about us. This is about our nation. This is about protecting our Constitution, protecting our courts, and protecting each other from tyranny. That's what this is really about. And that's what I hope to leave you with today. That's why it was so important to have Congressman Biggs on and to have Roger Stone on again, so that they could say their piece. There are very few people that are willing to speak out. These are a few of them. These are a few patriots that are willing to stand up and tell the truth and tell you the truth. Thank you again for being with me. Thank you for joining the Sarah Carter podcast. It was awesome to have you with us. Remember, folks, SarahACarter.com. You can read all my stories there. You can also follow me on @SCarterDC on Twitter. That's @SarahCarterDC on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram at SCarterDC. Again, that's SCarterDC on Instagram. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you, America. We are taking the story back.